Hiya, I'm Carly from Kip McGrath in Carlisle, and today we're looking at how to find fractions of different amounts. So you might hear a few different ways that people talk about how to do this. So the first one is the concept of, if I'm saying I want you to find a quarter of something, so say a quarter of 48, of in maths means multiply. So if I said a quarter of 48, I can work that out by doing a quarter times 48. Now we haven't looked at timesing and dividing fractions. That is later on, that's probably next week, but we will be. But essentially when you're doing that, we imagine that this is a fraction because 48 divided by 1 gives me 48. So we imagine it's a fraction and then we just do top times top, bottom times bottom. So 1 times 48 is 48. 4 times 1 is 4. So then I've got the fraction 48 over 4. And we need to remind children at this point that 48 over 4 means divided by. So 48 divided by 4 is 12. Not all of our answers will give us a whole number, but that one does. Okay, so that's how we use the word of to mean times and work it through. Another thing we could do at this point is remind them that when we've got a whole number, we only times it by the top. Tends to get a bit confusing, so that's why we do put this one, but it is up to you. This one is the most common way I teach children. Divide by the bottom, times by the top, because I always talk to them about the fact that the fraction, the bottom is the denominator, and it tells me how many bits I'm splitting something up to. So how many parts or how many bits. The top one tells me how many of those I want. It's called the numerator and it's how many we want. Okay, and so with this one I always remind them that okay, we're going to divide by the bottom to find out what one part is worth and times by the top to find out the number of parts we want. So say for example I wanted 2/3 of 36. What I'm doing first is I'm dividing by the bottom to find out what 1/3 would be. So 36 divided by the bottom, which is 3, is 12. So 1/3 is worth 12, but I need 2 of them. So 12 times 2 is 24. Okay, that's 2 methods. This one's quite a new method, the bar model. It's quite nice. It is a little bit dependent on how good children are at splitting a bar up into certain sizes. So for example, we can use it for anything, but the problem is that children struggle to make the blocks the same. So if they've got square paper, it's usually a bit easier. So for example, say I wanted to find 3/5 of 75. Okay, I'm going to have a bar that has 5 parts. Obviously, as an adult, you get quite good at splitting that up. A child would struggle with that and might start having them all really small. And so what you would suggest to them to do is to use maybe 2 squares per section of the bar and do it that way. Okay, so 3/5 of 75. Now, they still have to do essentially this, but somehow the concept seems clearer to them. So I say, okay, we need to find what a fifth is worth. So they all know that to find 1/5 or 1/2 or 1/4, we divide by what we're split, how many bits we're splitting it into. So we're going to do 75 divided by 5. I wouldn't expect them to necessarily know that off the top of their head, so they can use their division method that we've already covered. 5 into 7 goes 1, remainder 2, 5 into 25 goes 5. So then in my bar, I know that each block is worth 15. And this is where you would get them to grab a highlighter or a different colour pen or something. And you would say, okay, we've got the fifths, but we need 3 of them. So we're going to do this. We're going to have these 3 here. And they might highlight those. So essentially they've got 15, 15, 15. So they might add them up, or we would try and encourage them to do 15 times 3, which is 45. So essentially the maths is exactly the same as this one, but the idea is that they're understanding what it's worth and how it's calculated. So that's a few different methods of fractions of amounts. If your child has shown you a different method, then please pop that in the comments and we can have a chat through that. Thanks.